Okay. Hi guys, this is Book Geek, and today I'm going to be talking about The Summer I Turned Pretty and why I really like it over a lot of the other romance novels. So The Summer I Turned Pretty is the first book to a trilogy, so it's The Summer I Turned Pretty, It's Not Summer Without You, and We'll Always Have Summer. And the titles sound like a really sappy romance, and they kind of are, but the cool thing about them is that they're really particular about the character development in both of the love interests, and that's actually another interesting thing is that the main character, her name is Isabella, or they call her Belly, and she grows up with her mother's friend has two sons, and they kind of grow up together along with Belly's brother. She's always had this kind of secret love for both of the Fisher boys. So there's Conrad Fisher and Jeremiah Fisher. So on one hand you have Jeremiah Fisher, who's really heartfelt and he's really open with his feelings, and then you have Conrad, who's the strong yet silent type. He's the one that kind of plays hard to get, but at the same time they're almost like a balance to each other, which is why it's really hard for Bella to decide between the two. And as you go on through the books, they kind of continue to show their relationship over the years. I mean, they go back and forth in time since they were little to now. And the books just kind of make you want to keep going. You know, it is a trilogy and it does take a little more time, and you just want to, as you pick up the first one, it leads you on to the second, and of course you want to find out who she ends up with, which eventually leads you to the third one. However, I would rate these books a 3.5 out of 5 stars as a trilogy, just because in my perspective I think Jenny Han could have handled it in a sort of brief way, whereas she didn't really need to span the entire story into 3 books. I think she could have kept them within 2 and still had enough detail that you would want to know how the characters would end up in the end. And now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail and reveal a little bit more spoilers as to what parts I like particularly. So in the first book, I really liked how the character development showed that they were very family oriented. I mean, Susanna, which is the friend of Belly's mother, they kind of have a relationship of almost like sisters, and so of course their children get almost that same relationship, and it's just heartwarming to kind of read about their story. You kind of almost want to live in their lives a little bit. But then you do learn about Susanna's cancer, and of course that leads you to the second book, and that's where it gets so sad, and you really start to see each character's perspective, mostly just Jeremiah, Conrad, and Belly, because it goes between the 3, especially in the third book. But in the second book we lose Susanna, which is so sad because each character, especially in the third book, talks about how much of an impact she made on each of their lives. She offered so much advice, I mean, with life, with love, and the fact that she left so briefly after being a cancer survivor was so depressing, but at the same time, I guess you could say bittersweet, because her leaving made people realize things, I guess you could say, they didn't really appreciate. They didn't really appreciate the relationship they had with each other. They didn't really see how much they meant to each other until, unfortunately, Susanna died. So in the third book, We'll Always Have Summer, that's kind of the climax of the story, which is why I said in the beginning that I felt it should only have spanned over 2 books, because I think it should have been the character development then led to Susanna's death, and then going into kind of summing up It's Not Summer Without You and We'll Always Have Summer. You just put those in 2 because in the last book, you have them just, quickly going through college life, and then you have Jeremiah proposing to Belly, which was honestly the most frustrating thing about the book because of the way it all happened, but that's just my point of view. And then you see more of the perspectives of Belly, Jeremiah, and Conrad because the book is written from first person point of view, so it just switches between the three, and so you get a more insight into the characters' feelings, not necessarily like a third person omniscient. So the third book, Will Always Have Summer, starts off with them at college, and then Belly finds out that Jeremiah cheated on her, but then after he proposes to her and she says yes. And personally, I don't understand, but that's just my point of view. And so then after that, the characters just kind of start having to make more life decisions. And it's not much more of a romance, but it's more of a realistic sort of, I guess you could say a realistic sort of romance. And so you kind of get more of each of the characters, and towards the end of the book, it takes a completely different turn, and Jeremiah is going to get married to Belly. But I think the way Jenny Han ended it was pretty smart because she makes you kind of think that something's going to happen and it never really finishes off, and then you find, and then it goes to Belly writing back to Susanna that she said, I think just the way she had Belly write the letter was so clever because, as you're reading it, you're still at the edge of your seat wondering what is she talking about or who is she talking about. Because Susanna says, I hope you marry one of my Fisher boys one day, but if not, then it's okay, and I hope you're at 30 years old. And it's so sweet because she says, although I'm not at that age yet, I have married a man who I think is perfect for me, and his name just happened to be Fisher. And that part, it sank in my heart. Oh my gosh. Because you get so attached to these characters and you learn to love something about each and every one of them, and then you want the best for them. And the end of the book just kind of summed it up. You're not left at a cliffhanger where you're wondering, is she going to come out with the fourth one? You're just left content. And overall, all three of the books, I just think it should have just, the character development in the first book was pretty good, but in the second and third, I felt could have been conjoined together, and I think that would have really sent this series over the top. Hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.
Like and subscribe! And make sure to check out the Beauty Gurus video for a look inspired by this trilogy.
Fucking shit, man.